the Vince McMahon documentary chronicled the life, career, and controversies around wrestling's biggest and most influential figure, at least of the past 50 years. Overall thoughts on that were, it confirmed, I think, what you and I have said about Vince for years at this point. I mean, that Vince was a scumbag. Like,
Yeah.
I like that. That's the thing. I think people, when we're talking about Vince, like there's talking about like, innocent till proven guilty, blah 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 blah, and like that's all fine, right? But from the stuff that we know that is true, and also the stuff that the pattern that has like come about him, like with all of the scandals and all of the accusations, and I was like, the very best thing you can say about Vince in like as a human being is like the dude was a massive bully and a scumbag. That's the nicest thing you could say. And for me, like my big takeaway was like this documentary, like I think it was like not really made for wrestling fans. I think you and I had talked about it. It's like it was made for the general public. If you're a wrestling fan, you probably knew about most of the stuff outside of
Right.
the Ring Boy stuff, which I do want to talk about separately, but I think most of the stuff was stuff we already knew. And like, again, it just confirmed what we knew. Vince McMahon's not a nice guy.
Yeah. It also it did confirm that. It also confirmed that Hulk Hogan was kind of a piece of crap too. I mean, we already knew that, but it definitely confirmed. And you know what? Like,
I'm sorry. This dude, Andre, he told the Andre story again in this docuseries.
oh my God, he told the Andre story so many times. And what was really funny was Tony Atlas, Bruce Pritchard, Star Wars Sat, everybody said the same thing everybody always knows. Well, in Hulk Hogan goes, well, that was the first time Andre's been slammed. No, it wasn't. That was the first time Andre's lost. No, it wasn't. That's not even the first time you wrestled him. And you said that 30 times in this whole documentary.
Trevor, it wasn't even the first time that Andre had been slammed by Hogan in WWF. It happened a
Exactly.
couple of years ago, like I think 4 or 5 years before at Shea Stadium.
Yeah, it happened. It was, I want to say it was a dark show. I don't think it was
No,
televised.
well,
But
it wasn't televised, but it was
yeah,
like 30,000 people there. That was a big
right,
show.
right, right, right. But like it happened. It happened. It happened more than once. You slammed him more than once. He's been beaten more than once, and you take credit for all this crap that had nothing to do with you. And also, he was like, "Yeah, we had to call the Iron Sheik match." Oh my God!
Shiki, I wish. I prayed, bro. Do you know how happy I would have been if Sheik was alive for them to interview him for this
Oh my
docuseries?
God! They
Shout
said
out
they
to the
tried to, but he was actually, I guess, too sick or something
No,
to do it.
he passed away.
But yeah, he passed away in 23. A lot of these
Mm.
interviews happened 22. Yeah,
Oh man, y'all
because
should have had the Sheik in for this. Are you
a lot of these
serious?
interviews happened before
Oh my
before
god, half this docuseries was about
man,
Hulk Hogan. Could you?
before Hulk Hogan even before Vince even left, a lot of this was done. And if you notice
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the end, he wasn't able to. He declined the final interview
There you
because of
go.
what was going on. But dude, he was like, yeah, like the Iron Sheik match, we had to call him fly. I ran up to him and I kicked him in the mouth, and I was like, yeah, blah blah blah. This is what we're doing. And like, Sheik has talked about this match in nauseam. That's not what happened.
Mr. McMahon say, tonight you lose to Hulk Hogan. I say, okay, I lose to this jabroni, but Mr. McMahon, please do not bite the hand that feed me. That's basically look that.
That's not even. That's he's not lying.
That's
That's
basically
exactly.
what Iron Sheik
That's
said. Shout
basically
out to Iron
almost
Sheik.
verbatim what he said.
Shout out to Shiki Baby. Rest in peace.
That's almost what he said. Like Hogan, dude. If Hogan was Pinocchio, his nose would be like the size of Texas
I'm
at this
sorry.
point.
The beginning where he's combing his like hair extensions. That's what killed me. That did it for me.
No, You know what? The most honest people on that show were probably on that documentary were probably Shawn Michaels. Because he literally said, he goes, you know what? I was a dick. I mean, what can I say? I was a dickhead. Like, he literally admitted to everything he did wrong and what he did wrong. Brett took no responsibility for anything.
No, 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 no. Oh, here's the thing. Brett will never. Okay, Brett will never take responsibility for anything.
Exactly.
But also, he was candid. He was very candid.
He was honest to a point. He was definitely honest to a point. And if you know anything about the relationship between them, you know what parts he was holding back a little bit on. But in his defense, like Omar said, he was very candid. He was open with about a lot of things. I won't say everything because you wouldn't until his dying days, you would never get the truth out of Bret Hart about a lot of stuff.
Except Goldberg, how he feels about Bill Goldberg.
Except Goldberg, he'll tell that all day long. and ask him who's the best wrestler in wrestling. Him. No one else is ever better than him.
Well, look, this guy, El Dandy, he's pretty good. Shit, for the greatest promo Bret Hart has ever cut. It's like, how about El Dandy? He seems like a stand-up guy. He can challenge for my title. I'm like, bro, give this man an Emmy right now. He will never cut a better promo than this.
I mean,
yeah.
One thing that I didn't know, that I knew but I didn't know, I didn't know his relationship with his father, Vince's relationship with his father.
Yeah,
that was interesting.
That was an interesting one. Like, in the docuseries, for all y'all out there, Vince tells this story of his like, he did not know his biological father, who was Vincent J. McMahon, Vince McMahon Sr., until he was 12 years old. And he tells the story of, like, the first time he met him, he ran up to him to give him a big hug, and Vince Sr. just kind of like shies away, gives him a pat on the back, and I think that's like a very interesting dynamic that was captured in this docuseries. It was like, for lack of a better term, like the trauma of, like, Vince, his relationship with not only his biological father, but the abuse that he suffered from his biological mother, the abuse he suffered from his stepfather, and kind of how that permeated through the generations of McMahon, because there was an entire episode basically that was dedicated to Vince's treatment of his kids. And, I think Shane McMahon, right? That was like the big one.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Like, and God bless Stephanie. God bless her. She's first and foremost, I can say some bad things about both his kids, but nothing that they actually intentionally did. They let some things go that they shouldn't have, especially with Stephanie. I wouldn't have let being called pretty much being called a slut. No, I wouldn't have let that go. He wanted that to happen, and I wouldn't have let that go. But big ups on her for stopping some of the storylines, which he was mad about her for. Oh,
I mean, look, if we want to talk about the storyline that Vince even admitted to, the storyline where in storyline he would have impregnated his own daughter.
Yeah, that was the storyline.
Number one reason why I am afraid to for a very long time I was afraid to show up my non-wrestling friends wrestling. Stuff like that, because you never know what's gonna happen, and it's like, could you imagine like introducing someone to wrestling and like that's the first thing they see? It's like,
dude, could you imagine, like, if for instance, could you imagine introducing a young woman that wants to get into wrestling, right? And she watches the Trish Stratus stuff that they did early on.
Yep.
That's like, he pretty much treated her like if she was an errand girl, but she was pretty much
it's a dog. No, like he literally like physically treated her like a dog. Like that was the whole point of that segment.
She walked around on all fours, unfortunately, and barked like a dog.
Yeah,
it was wild. There was a lot of stuff in there, and I'm actually very proud of his kids and proud of Shane too for like trying to step out of that shadow and trying to change that narrative.
that and I think like that's like one of the more interesting stories that was like kind of told because look, aside from the allegations and things like that we've talked about and like are very serious and need to be told as part of the story of Vince McMahon. I think like this was a really interesting at least surface level like dissection of kind of what makes Vince tick. I think no one will ever be able to get this much insight into Vince and like how he operates, but this was like as much as we will ever really get. And one of the things that really like shines out is like that trauma that I mentioned earlier. That like Vince has this line in the docuseries where he says like he doesn't believe that abuse and things like that cause one to abuse others or whatever, but the irony is not lost on me. It's apparently lost on Vince when it comes to that, because this is someone who's been accused of sexual abuse, like physical abuse, has in interviews knocked papers out of people's hands because he's frustrated when he's attacked.
I remember that Bob Costas interview.
Yeah,
I do.
Or
I remember watching that.
Or even that story that Paul Heyman, that insane story he told about Vince, where he said, where Vince and Shane were having a creative disagreement at a meeting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Vince takes a knife, hands it to Vince or Shane. He hands the knife to Shane and he says, right here. Right here. If you want to make that decision, you're going to have to put that knife right here. And if you don't, then I'll know that you are not willing to do what it takes in order to really take this over. Or you can buy me out like I bought out my old man.
And he knew he couldn't do that.
Either that, and it goes on, either that, or you do what it takes, just like I would have done what it takes if my old man wasn't giving me my way. So Paul Heyman, according to this story, according to Paul Heyman's story, again, Paul Heyman, Mr. Wrestling Storytelling, essentially said, like, Vince said, Shane, you can either kill me or buy me out, but this story is not happening while I'm in charge. And that was like one of the, it seems, final straws in this dynamic between Shane and Vince, because eventually Shane would go on to leave in 2010.
Yeah, I mean, Shane even at one point, I'm sure you saw the documentary as well, like one point he actually wanted to get his own promotion.
UFC.
And he wanted UFC. Yeah. And now see, the thing is, I knew UFC. I knew this tidbit. I heard this earlier on years ago, that UFC was selling. They were interested to sell. And Shane spoke in front of his dad. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? And Vince bit. Vince was like, oh, that's not bad. Not a bad idea. But whose money you putting in it?
Yo, he's such a dick for that.
Whose money you putting in it? Because it's not mine.
That's like if you got a kid. That's literally like if you got a kid. It's like, Dad, I'm gonna get Dad. Like I want the I want the Xbox like Series S. Right. Oh, that's great. You want that? Yeah. Yo, how you getting it?
I mean, I tell a similar story about my grandfather and my dad. Like when I was a kid, they good grades was a big thing, and I was proud of myself because I got all C's one time. And my granddad was like, "Oh, that's good, but they're not B's." It just walks off.
That's crazy.
I mean, but that's kind of what that was like. Like, oh, you like that? I don't care. But no, it's just one of those things. Like, you see the abuse that Shane and even Stephanie endured, even his wife endured, because this man was a hurt man. Now, before I say anymore, I don't excuse him. It's just because you were hurt does not mean you hurt others. That's not how it goes.
Yep.
But me and Omar talk excessively, in nauseam, about men's mental health. We talk about this all the time. If he isn't an example of what men's mental health can do to a person, I don't know what is. And I'm not trying to be, trying to
I think it's a great
be
point.
too, but yeah, it's true though. Like this man was abused as a child. He was abused by his father. His father never told him he loved him until the day he died. Something
Allegedly.
else,
Allegedly.
allegedly.
I mean,
Now, allegedly now, because
I
I've
think
heard
that's a little bit of
different
Vince.
stories. Like,
Again, I am no psychiatrist, but I also could see that being a little bit of Vince like telling himself that and believing it over
because
the years.
actually, I've heard a couple stories where Vince Senior actually did say
Tony
he loved.
Atlas in this docu-series, I thought in the early episodes especially, was very insightful about like kind of
Oh
the
yeah,
wrestlers and the locker room point of view of these things. He was like, oh yeah, no, Vince Sr. hated him. But I do think like
Vince,
the mental health point you're making is very
oh
I
yeah,
think apt, because
this,
if you don't take care of it and if you don't like address like issues, like whatever we think about Vince McMahon, we think a lot. That is someone who went through a horrible ordeal when he was younger. There's no doubt about it, right? And had he had or had he taken care of some of those things, and had he sought help, I think there's the potential that some of the cyclical aspects of abuse, hopefully at least, would have not happened.
yeah. I mean, you don't know. I mean, because that was a different time too.
Yeah.
Like men weren't allowed to do certain things to help themselves, and everybody wasn't going to diagnose you with mental health at that point, especially if you were a man. Like mental health was something that didn't really exist in most families. But if he was allowed to, things might have turned out different. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's what if. It's a what if. It's a big what if. But that doesn't excuse the piece of shit he grew into. But it does. It might explain it though.
The silver lining that I kind of took away from it was like, look at the way like Shane talks about his kids compared to
Mm-hmm.
like the way Vince talks about his, and I think like like that whole generational like trauma or whatever that I was talking about earlier. I
Right.
think like Shane has definitely done his part and then some to break that and make sure that hopefully his kids don't go through that. And I think same with Stephanie and Paul Levesque
That's
as
one
well.
thing that I didn't remember hearing much about. Did they talk about their kids?
There was
Paul and
Shane did, and it was
I
like
know
that.
Shane talked about his, but I didn't think Stephanie talked about
Stephanie
hers too
didn't, but
much.
like I mean, like we kind of like have a little bit of insight. Like Triple H left the PLE, because he had
Right.
to go help his daughter go move into college, like I mean, things like that, and like the way that Stephanie kind of talks about her kids, like it's not like the way Vince was talking about his kids. He very hard on them, very
Oh,
very hard on them.
absolutely.
Um,
It's more, but he's. It was kind of like a disappointment in certain things, Like he
and
never
everything
really
with
talked
Shane,
about.
he did not like
Oh,
Shane.
yeah, everything was Shane. It was everything was Shane. Like he never really said he was proud of Shane. Like he did, but he didn't at the same time.
The crazy thing is, Shane didn't get that until Mania 32 after jumping off a
Yep,
Hell in a Cell.
I'm proud of that boy.
That's crazy. That's insane. Obviously, like many other things were touched on this, and we don't have to do a full recap of the docu series, but like,
No, but I know there's a couple things
I
that
mean,
you wanted to
the
throw in.
the Owen Hart piece was something like it was. Look, I think we all kind of know what the defense was going to be. That didn't surprise me.
Oh, of course.
Of
No,
like continuing the show, even though Owen had just literally died in the ring, and they knew that he had basically died in the ring, and the blood was still there, and all that stuff. Regardless of that, what kind of surprised me, and in hindsight probably shouldn't have, but did when I watched it, was how quick Vince was to say, well, had it been Shane, the show would have gone on. Had it been
right.
me, the show would have gone on, and he had no regrets about it. That's what surprised me. I was like, oh, what? Like, damn.
But he said it real quick too, because I forget who said it before. Was it Was it Tony that said it, or someone said like think about if it was his kid, it
That
was
was
whatever.
so that was Brett in an old
Right?
interview.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He had said, if it was Shane splattered all over the mat, that's a quote from Brett. I
Yeah,
don't think it
that's what
goes
he
the
said.
same way. And Vince was like, yes, it would have.
Yep. And that's kind of what shocked me. Like, I mean, it shocked me a little bit, and then like for me, and I've said it before, like watching that documentary, even when I watched the Dark Side of the Ring, I remember like sitting there ready to watch one of my favorite wrestlers for pay per view. Now he claims the arena was dark. It was not that dark.
If
You
you're
could
in the
still
arena, even if it's dark, you can see what's going on.
you could still see it. And that's what I was saying. Like, I mean, remember seeing it bright lights. I mean, of course, I was watching it from home, but I remember everyone in the audience. They panned the audience. You could see faces. People saw this happen. His defense was it was dark. No one really saw it, and the show must go. That's as I mean, I get it. These people bought tickets, but half of those people came to see Owen Hart, and half those people left after the fact. How do you perform as a performer? How do you expect to have good spirits, more morale, and even do what you're supposed to do when you see your best friend's blood or coworker's blood on the ring?
Jeff Jarrett and Deborah, Jeff Jarrett and
That-
Deborah, literally saw Owens at that point lifeless body be
Yep,
carried off backstage, and were then rushed to do a promo
promo.
where
Yep,
Jeff Jarrett, in the same sentence, says, "Owen Hart, I'm praying for you, buddy." Deborah and her puppies goes on with the promo, and
and
it's
Deborah couldn't speak. Deborah was inconsolable.
yep.
She could not speak at all.
In any other work setting, though, Trevor, it's like something like that. Like, think about the NFL. The NFL, the literally the biggest sports juggernaut in the entire country, billions upon billions of dollars every year. They stopped a prime time ESPN. They stopped it, didn't play it
Yep.
after like
Didn't
Damar
play it.
Hamlin died on the field and like was obviously then resuscitated, but died on the field.
They did. And they stopped the game. They stopped the game. We're talking about NFL, one of the biggest sports in the nation, juggernauts in the nation, like billions of dollar corporation, and they stopped a Monday night game. They stopped. Like, why can't you stop a pay per view? Like, why do
Because
you expect? Like, why do you expect people to perform with their friends' blood on the Jerry Lawler literally, like me and my brother watched it. We remember it verbatim, like it was yesterday. Jerry Lawler comes back. He sits in front of the camera. You see his face. He is he's shook. Most I don't know if many people know this. Family friend of the Hearts, best good friend of all of the Hearts. He comes back and he sees his friend dead in the ring. He pretty much said, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. Later, it comes out he said he goes into JR's ear and says he's dead. Owen's dead. Owen's dead.
yeah,
And like, how do you expect that? That's not. I mean, I get business is business, and there's a lot of things as a manager and as whatever I've done in a business that I wish I hope I haven't never have to do again. But it was never involving someone splattered, as Brett said, all over a ring or a floor. You know what I mean?
yeah. I think we all agree like Vince or also like I'm of the opinion too that should never have been Vince's call to make.
Nope.
Like look, this is not me like even spreading conspiracies. This is just like the truth, right? Owen Hart was not pushed. No, like it was not an intentional thing. Like that is certainly not the case. However,
No.
you had people in the building that night who alleged that night that they saw a push, whether or not, and obviously it's untrue, whether or
Yeah.
not it's true. If someone says that and that incident happens that night without the facts being known about the situation, the cops should have shut that show down. That should have been a investigation. That should have been a crime scene, or at least like part of the investigation. The show should have been stopped. No one should have been at ringside. No one should have been able to contaminate or whatever that part, right?
Yeah.
And I think Vince should have known better, but the police and whoever was in charge of making that decision too also deserves a lot of the blame, because it never should have been his decision to begin with. That show should have been shut down.
Because regardless of what happened, with a situation like that, when the EMT is rushed in, the cops come shortly behind. I was an EMT for a little while. Cops come shortly for an incident, something like that. Cops come shortly behind. The cops then deem whether it's a crime scene or not, and deem the scene safe for even the EMTs to come through. So that's what should have happened. So you're absolutely right. The cops should have done the investigation and seen what the scene was and deemed it like, shut this down. We need an investigation, or vice versa. The owner of the establishment, the owner of the what's going on, of the event going on, should never have had that power. Never. Because legally they could have ate him up, which is why she got money from the settlement in the first place. But because of that puts him liable.
Yeah. Obviously, like so much happened in this docuseries. I think there's like, we could literally talk about this for hours if we wanted to.
Oh yeah, we could. But there was one other one that I wanted to talk about, and we can go on to something
go for it,
more uplifting. But the Ring Boy scandal.
Let's talk about that separately.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that separately, because that requires a little bit more nuance to get into. But
you're right. You can't just go into that. You have to a little build up.
Yeah, it's a bit heavy. But Vince McMahon docuseries is out.
Check it out. It's worth watching. It's done very well. You want
to know an interesting story? Sorry, so the producer. So the director of the docuseries was the same guy who worked on Tiger King. So he had no background in wrestling. He doesn't really know wrestling. He doesn't know anything about Vince. Trevor, they would they would begin, or so they would have a schedule, right, where it's like, okay, at 3 p.m. they're going to have like an hour or two or whatever to record with Vince. And then like what would happen is they would set up as a professional, like Netflix produced docuseries, like professional crew that's been there, done that, right?
Right.
They would sit there for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Vince's secretary would come in and say, "Oh, he's been delayed. He's been delayed. Doing God knows what. We don't know.
Right.
We don't know. Delayed. Vince would walk in with like an entourage at like 11 p.m., Trevor.
What the fuck?
For these recordings.
I'm sorry.
Yep, for these recordings. And by the time, they do makeup, he gets into like his suit, because like the way it kind of works is, how like Vince is, or everyone's kind of wearing the same thing in like every single interview they do, is because like they have one outfit picked out and they always change into that right before the shoot.
Gotcha. That's what I thought. Okay.
So, but yeah, so Vince changes the news about it's like midnight even after that, by the time like they get ready to actually like sit down and shoot with him. So it's like they're just going into the night. They've been there for like 12 hours trying to get Vince, and the same thing would happen the next time they would try. And
I'm surprised he didn't pull the plug, because they actually did say they pulled the plug on it one time before anyway. And I'm actually surprised they didn't just scrap it all together.
Well, no, I mean they couldn't. They had already signed away the rights were signed away. It was already done. Netflix was like, we're getting this out. Vince tried to buy it, though. He did try to buy it.
He definitely did, yeah. I know that.
He had the money to, but Netflix apparently said no.
Vince is an ass. I swear he is.
It's a perfect way to end it.